Yes, guys, welcome back to the Natural Muscle Podcast. Luke Williams and Finn McNamara here. So this is episode 3 now, guys. And today we're going to primarily just go through a bit more in depth in terms of kind of like our backstories, where we've come from, what got us through to natural bodybuilding, what led us kind of down this route from first kind of like initially picking a dumbbell up to then transitioning into stepping on stage. And for the vast majority of people, it isn't a short process. It's a long process, and it's a case of being in that and learning to love the process as long as possible. And ultimately, both me and Finn, I confidently say that we're in this for the love of training, and that's what's kind of brought us to right. How can we challenge ourselves and better ourselves and have something to work for whilst progressing in the gym as well? So Finn, do you want to kind of kick us off? Obviously, I know you've been coming up to a decade within kind of competing soon enough, really. So what kind of what started you getting in towards competing in natural bodybuilding, really?
To be fair, it was one of them. I always trained a little bit, but I definitely wouldn't say properly. So I didn't train meant properly through my teenage years. Went to the gym bits and bobs when I was like 15, 16, but I just did a lot of running. So it was very skinny, basically.
Hybrid.
Yeah. Today I would be definitely
Yeah.
hybrid. So I wasn't like your archetypal, like a lot of the lads nowadays who were like 13, 14, and they're like optimal, top set back off, like cream of rice eating, like teenagers now. And that's probably why the teens and juniors are getting better by the year for sure. So yeah, I dabbled with the gym in my like mid-teen years. I did a little bits, but wasn't proper at all. And obviously, loads of running, and then joined the military. While I was in there, I did like bits and bobs. I know we covered this a bit on episode 1, but you just do bits and bobs because you don't have a proper routine, especially in like a unit like I was in. Like some like engineers, dare I say it, or like signal, like I don't want to be like disrespectful, like rear echelon people, so people who are like not, because obviously in the infantry you're off here, there, everywhere doing a lot of shit. They sometimes have a bit more time for the gym because they're not out and about as much, but you'd get a good run with your training, and then you'd be told, right, we're going to Cyprus on a 6-week exercise. So of that, 3 weeks is going to be in the field, as you call it. So literally living, out and about in the wild. So there's no gym, there's no training, there's no anything. You eat,
Surviving.
you do your exercise, and you sleep. Basically, like that's it. And you walk around, get lots of miles on your legs. So you can't really be that consistent, or as consistent. So I simply wasn't. And then probably 2013, so I'd have been 20, just turning 21. I like started taking it a bit more seriously because we had a bit more time off the back of coming off the tour. So I trained a little bit more, and I probably just started training legs then realistically, like properly.
As we all do.
Not just like little bits and bobs that I'd done before. So again, I'm a late developer in that sense. And then I was on and off for 2 or 3 years. And again, it was only once I left the military that I had like kind of a void of a goal for training. Because obviously you train in the military to stay fit for your job. So the gym was just kind of, and I obviously started PT. And so it was kind of just training. And I was like, well, what am I actually training for now? Because, I didn't have the same, dare I say it, love for training that I have now, where obviously I say now I train the same way regardless of competing. But back then I just needed a little bit of a focus point because I just left the military, and it was a case of I just need something, because it's hard sometimes, and a lot of people do struggle. So we have to have like a new focus, and obviously some people it leads them down the wrong paths at the time. So I was just like, okay. And as I said in episode 1, the typical men's physique, like your Ryan Terrys and everything, it was like, oh yeah, they're guys who I followed. Didn't really follow the big open guys as much, because it was like, I know they're obviously on steroids, but these guys aren't. So, well, in my head, I didn't think they were. So that was kind of like, okay, that's kind of like more what I do, because I knew back then I couldn't be what would have been like, it would have been Phil Heath, Jay Cutler kind of era, wouldn't it? Like I knew in my head, right, I can't be those. So who can I be? And naively, again, I looked at Ryan Terry and thought, oh, you know, that's kind of attainable. Obviously, what he is now is definitely not attainable, in my opinion, for me and my, you know, very limited genetics. But so I just like thought, okay, that's kind of what I will think about. And I still wasn't really properly bodybuilding training, and then got into just thought, okay, in a few years, because I knew I didn't have any muscle basically. So I was like, in a few years, I could try and do like a men's physique show with like the UK BFF, because that was the first federation I'd kind of heard of. And obviously back then, that's when they had the IFBB qualifier at the end of the year. So I Googled, like, well, I need a coach basically. So even though I was a PT, I actually had the foresight and the maturity, like unlike a lot younger ones do nowadays, where it's like, I do need a coach here. Like, I can't just decide, oh yeah, I'm doing it myself and I'm a prep coach, and I've never prepped. So I just Googled literally natural bodybuilder coach, as in like coaches who want coach a natural bodybuilder. And I don't know if he'd got a sponsored ad or he'd just launched or whatever it was, his website, but Damien Lees, who then became my coach for the next basically 8 years, 9 years, no, yeah, 8, sorry, he was top of the Google. So literally it was just by chance. So I clicked on him, sent him an email through his website, and was just like, this is me. Do you think in a few years' time I could compete? And to be fair, like he emailed back and was just like, okay, have you got some like photos? Just so obviously understanding of like where you're at. So I sent him, and he just said, so he rang me up and said, yeah, you're pretty lean. Because by that point I was still doing a lot of running, and I had started like a bit of a summer cut kind of thing. So I wasn't lean, but I had abs and a little, you know, some separation. Obviously I didn't have any legs. So he kind of just said, you're pretty lean, like you could compete this year. And I was like, oh yeah, but no, I can't do that. And he said, yeah, but in natural bodybuilding. I was like, well, what's that? And he said, and then he just opened my eyes. He showed me, you know, we had like an hour-long phone call, like talking to me about the federations, sent me the website so I could look at the past year's winners, all that stuff. So it was like, okay, right, what's all this about? So I looked into it, went to meet him, so like an in-person, like basically get to know him, and also so he could look at me in person and give an honest recommendation. And I wasn't obviously at that person's level, but the person, I remember it now, he was called David Galan, or Galan. He was from the Faroe Islands, of all places, I believe. And he'd won the previous year's WMBF Pro, maybe in men's physique, or he'd won a title in men's physique because he was on a show poster. So Damien was like, oh, obviously he didn't say I was that level, but it was like, well, look, for men's physique, you actually look how big he is compared to you. That's not far away, is it? And I was like, oh, no, that's actually quite all right. And I'd obviously looked at a few of the previous year's winners who had been 2015. So I'm trying to think if there was any names off the top of my head. I think AJ may have been in the teens that year. And I think the overall winner, I might be wrong, might have been Adrian Gray, who now works with the PCA. It might have been. I might be wrong there. Who obviously, I was like, fucking hell, how's he natural? Like, he's amazing. So, long story short, we were basically like, look, there's this, and this was in May 2016, so it's quite late on to start. But like I said, I was quite lean. Well, civilian lean, as I call it, Gen Pop lean. And he was like, there's a show in Scotland, the Caledonian Classic, which the UK DFBA used to run up until COVID. And since COVID, they've not done it, unfortunately. Really good show. Oh, no, they might have done one since, one. But I think numbers dropped, so they basically stopped. But it was always a really good show, audience-wise. And it was a really good atmosphere. So he said that was in like July, it would have been. End of June, early July. And he said, you know, why don't we go for that in men's physique? And then we can see about later shows in the season if you want to do bodybuilding. Because he explained that bodybuilding's, you have to be a bit leaner. I'd have still been a junior, so he said that was an option. So obviously in my head, I'd still gone in with like the men's physique kind of because I'd seen that from the assisted side. So got straight into it, prepping. I was still running, which you look back now and you kind of like, okay, is that ideal? But
now, but you can do it, and it's
you can.
funny enough, we've both come from that background, which we'll get onto as well later on.
Well, like you said, you've done it, and just to give him a little shout out because we did on 2.0 that got deleted. Nick Adams, like ex-marine, competes most years, heavyweight, natural bodybuilder, has won everything. He's won a Mr. Britain. He's won overalls at British level. He's won assisted British titles in like classic or athletic. He's done a lot. And he actually won his pro card last year in the MPA, which was like I know it meant a lot to him because that's like showing for basically a decade of trying. And he's the same. He will do a marathon, not a marathon. He'll do like a half marathon in peak week because he's got that marine.
I mean, yeah. So he's done the half marathon from there. I mean, like Cudis. I mean, like Cure. Bringing it to, was it 2023? 20?
Last year.
Yeah, last year, wasn't it? So last year, and did Worlds, placed third or fourth, I believe at Worlds, and 2-3 weeks out, run a marathon. Like it is doable. I definitely wouldn't like recommend to do it, but like if you've got a passion for both of them things, can you manage them? Like absolutely. So like it's not one of them things like people coming through into natural bodybuilding and think, oh, do I have to do this or do I have to restrict from that? I mean, like, there's going to be an element of restriction, but ultimately depends how much you want to commit to the goal. Can you manage both? Yes, absolutely. Will you be 100% of both from it? Probably not, but there is some genetic freaks that can get away with that.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. And like I say, I don't think it detracted a lot because, like I said, I was under muscled for junior bodybuilding. So got straight in. So just some background because I know people are like interested in this kind of thing. It was like I was probably on between 1900 to 100 calories most days. Still decent carb, and I was following like a semi-meal plan because Damien was quite favourable towards that at that approach, particularly obviously because I was new and it was like he just wanted to make sure I was doing it. So plenty of potatoes as is oats and all the good stuff. So did it. I don't know. I couldn't remember. I know it's poor to off the top of my head body weight or anything like that. I know I would have been I reckon I'd have been sub 170 at the start of this prep, if you'd call it that. So that'd have been in like May. I don't know how much I'd have lost from there, but got pretty lean and then went to the show. Fortunately, my sister lives in Scotland and lives about 50 minutes away from the venue, as was in a place called Musselburgh, just outside Edinburgh. I think it's really famous. It's got a massive race course. So I think it's like, because I saw the horse racing venue like across the road. So I think it's like, it hosts a lot of big races. So any horse racing aficionados probably know it. So I was fortunate with that because obviously Scotland's miles away and it's like, I just started out as a PT and like no money and all that. So like traveling to Scotland, finding somewhere to stay, all that good stuff. So she, as she jokingly sent, because she listened to last week's episode about tanning, she also said, don't ask your sister to tan you because she helped tan me. Now, obviously, it wasn't anything, I had more than a sock on because obviously I was men's physique, so I didn't need to be full whack. So that was fortunate, but she kindly offered, because again, I had no idea about tan. I didn't know anything. And this was before Nicola was a show tanner. At least she wasn't doing that show because it was probably too far away. So rock up and had zero expectations, no idea. In my head, I was a bit like, I'll probably not even place, but I'm just seeing what it's about. So my first ever show going to is the show I'm competing at. So fortunately, men's physique was on towards the end of the day. So I got to watch a lot of it. So actually the first couple of classes were like obviously teens and juniors, so I could compare myself. And I was like, so this is the first time seeing a show and I'm standing on that stage in like 3 hours time. So it was a weird one, but I suppose that's me. I don't know. Maybe that gave you less fear or I don't know. Because I wasn't actually that nervous. genuinely wasn't. I know a lot of people are, oh, if you're not nervous, you're lying, but I've never been nervous to go on the stage ever, at any of the shows I've done. And shout out a very good junior winner that day, who's now assisted, and he's going for his IFBB Pro card this year, called Liam. He's called the Scottish Wolf on Instagram. He's fucking massive now. He was a big lad then, and he won a juniors. And when he come out, I was like, fucking hell, like, that's put me off junior bodybuilding this year, because he was really, really good. But Damien was sat with me, and he was kind of like, well, actually, you probably could have come like maybe third today, looking at that top 5. So I was like, oh, that's quite cool. That's nice to hear. We'll see about that in the future and later in the season. So come out for men's physique. I think there was about 16 guys, biggest class of the day. Again, everyone was chatty, everyone was really nice, pumping up and things like that. So it was just a nice feeling straight away. No one was being funny. Quite a few lads I got to know that day, who a couple I still am in touch with. So Luke McKellen, I was literally speaking to him the other day on Instagram about last week's episode. And yeah, met him. And, 8 years later, we still chat. I don't think he competes anymore, but he still trains, as we all would and do. He came second that day. Really good physique, really good physique. Really tight. What you want in men's physique: good arms, nice looking abs, and tiny waist. And so anyway, we go out. You do your little call outs as they do in number order. So obviously, being 16, it was, I imagine we did like a 5, a 5, and a 6. It might have been 2 6s, and I don't know. When anyway. And then when the first call-outs, again, I didn't understand what first call-outs are, because I'd never been to a show. So I had an idea that obviously they are the people they want to look at first, but I wasn't like, oh, if you're in first call-outs, you're like doing pretty well. And I was in them, I was off to the side. I wasn't in the middle. So I was like, oh, it's pretty cool. I couldn't really pose, I'll be honest. I could pose, but I look back now and I was too focused, because again, that was my idea I was squeezing my abs. So front shots, I was just tensing my abs as hard as possible and not showing any lats, not lifting my chest up, not showing, because I was just thinking, show your abs every time. Because growing up, it was just abs. That's all I thought about as a teenager, is like, oh, if you've got abs, that's the world's problem sorted. So probably, if I'd posed better, I might have done slightly better on the day. I might have got third. So I came fourth, and really, really happy with that, and was quite like, wow, that's cool. Like, I've done all right. So then that literally started it. If I'd not placed that day, I don't know. Maybe I'd have been like, well, that was an experience, but maybe it's not for me. I genuinely don't know. So placing that day probably is why, I carried on in this crazy sport. The guy who won, just off for a little history lesson, a lad, he actually ended up on Love Island about 2 years ago, called Wallace Wilson. He was really, really good, and he went on. He may have won the British that year, actually, or he certainly was top 2 or 3 at the British. He might have won it. So yeah, that was the first show, and I was like, okay, that was fun. I ate everything the next day, because Damien kind of said, look, day off the diet. We had the UK DFBA Northern, which would have been at the end of August, I'd imagine, because it usually is. It'd been like that August bank holiday. So it's like probably 6 weeks later from that show. So he said, look, day off the diet. And Damien likes that approach. He always lets people have, unless they've obviously got a show like the next week or a couple of weeks later. Nothing crazy, as he said, but I went a bit crazy.
How far up did you go then, Finn? Let everyone know. I'm sure this is the interesting bit everyone wants to know.
I don't genuinely. I don't have a memory of the weights. I genuinely don't. But I imagine it was a good few pounds. But it was one of them where I don't think it was like it didn't ruin the rest of the prep. Put it that way. But I had a nice meal at my sister's that evening. She made some homemade stuff, and then next day driving down, I had a big breakfast, before we left. I think she might have done pancakes. I think she might have. And then big services. I knew exactly what services I wanted to stop at because it was like there's a big one near the M6 at like Penrith. So obviously you come down, go across, come back down. That's the way I went. So anyway, got a massive KFC. Obviously half tanned. Everyone in the KFC was staring at me like, "Who's this fucking weirdo?" Family bucket, smashed that. Got home and the Euros are on. England weren't playing, but my mate came round and we just got like a chippy, loads of little bits. So, yeah, I reckon I did a good high thousands calories the next day, but I don't think it necessarily ruined the prep, so to speak. So the next show would have been the UK FBA Northern 6 weeks later, and again I went men's physique because I don't believe I qualified at the Caledonian for the finals. I'm not sure. Maybe it might have been top three. I don't remember it, so I probably didn't. And it taught me into doing junior bodybuilding, and I was a bit like, okay, I looking back, definitely did not have the legs for it, but I had a little bit of shape to them, and I was under muscle, but again, it was just okay. Let's just see. And I was a top end of a junior, so I'd have turned 20. I was 23. So I was just at the cusp. And realistically, had I been, in the novices, it'd have probably been, I definitely wouldn't have placed, thinking off the top of my head. But get there, and it was at where they used to have them in Haywood. They didn't have it last year there, but we've had it most years there. They had it when we did it. Good venue, very warm backstage, as you know, red hot because it's just like a little glass room almost. So anyway, did that, and obviously juniors with the FBA, as we said last week, are on second. Sorry, it's teens and juniors. So it was kind of like, right, I've got two categories to get used for, and I had a few friends come up for which was nice. I think my mum might have been there, so I had a few people there. It was my first show. It was just my sister because she was my lift basically for the day. So there was just three of us in juniors, and funnily enough, in the teens was Jack Richardson, who a lot of people know on social media. Big guy now, and he was a big teen. He was a very big teen back then, and he won the British that year. And I think he may have come second at WNBF Worlds as a teen. I don't know if they even do teens and juniors at WNBF Worlds now.
I think you're just into the actually open classes. I'm pretty sure it's just like your weight class from there. That's why those who actually get that invitation to Worlds, when they're in either a teens or a juniors, it's kind of like weighing up, seeing where they would fall. Tends to, for a lot of juniors these days, they probably plays pretty well anyway, because they tend to be very heavily muscled now, because they get into it a lot earlier, and there's obviously more people putting more stuff out there in terms of their education and stuff from the start. But for teens, I think like a lot of them just weigh it up and see where they fall. And we even had that with even the Europeans, not WNBF Worlds, with Josh Campbell this year when he went in through into the open classes, like very well shaped and stuff, but against bigger guys, sometimes it's not going to be your day. But in years to come, I'm sure he'll get the placings he's wanted for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, there was only three of us on the day, and walking out, I was behind. I think I was the middle one of the three walking out, and the guy stood in front of me who won it, and then did the men's heavyweight later on, and I think came second. He went to finals, and I think he may have, or did he even do finals? I think if he'd gone to finals, in my opinion, he'd have placed very highly. He's called Scott Cunningham. We're still every slightly in touch in terms of he likes the odd post I put on Instagram, and he was a nice guy, Scottish guy, again, another Scottish freak, mate. And I'm stood behind it, and I'm not kidding. His back's like whoosh, big, thick traps, huge, dense back. Obviously, he'd been training properly for probably 5 or 10 years prior to this being a junior. And I'm stood behind him like, well, I'm not winning, Chris. But the guy behind me I'd not really seen. And I think he was called Ryan Bolger. So I don't know if he was Chris's son or nephew, but he's definitely a relation of Chris. So I not really looked at him, but Scott stood in front of me. I was like, fucking hell, okay. I'm not a bodybuilder because this guy's massive. And he probably was a bigger than average bodybuilder. So anyway, we go out. I come third out of three, probably quite fairly. Scott was massive, pretty lean. Ryan was pretty lean, a little bit bigger than me, and actually had a pair of legs. So again, I was like, okay. But I got an invite to finals and then did physique later on that day, and I think I came third or fifth, one of them. I think it was fifth, and that was in a far bigger class. I think there was 20 in that. I think it was the biggest class of the day. And again, I went out with that one as just kind of an enjoyment. I'd already kind of been on stage, so I was like, okay. And I got to speak to another couple of guys who I'm still in touch with today. So, like you say, you make these friends going forward. So then it was a case of, right, do you want to do finals? Because I don't think I got the invite for men's physique. Again, no, I wouldn't have if I came fifth. So it was like, you can do finals as a junior. Obviously, it's a bit of a free hit because you've seen the standard. Do you want to do it as an experience, or do you want to kind of call it a day here? And I was like, oh, British finals, big experience. Why not? I'm not really bothered, or well, I say not bothered. I wasn't really like expectations. I was like, yeah, let's just see what happens. So, unfortunately, I decided I'd booked it a while before. I just went on. I went on holiday about a week after the Northern to France. My nan and granddad lived there until this last year. They'd lived there for decades. So I went out to them. I booked it a while before, and it was one of them where obviously Damien couldn't really say no. But I imagine in his head he was like, well, this isn't ideal. So I'd no gym. I wouldn't say, I definitely didn't eat everything, but I wasn't necessarily stopping myself. But I was definitely trying to eat good protein servings per meal. I wasn't tracking anything, but I didn't go in. Like, I did have I'd have an ice cream. We'd go out for a meal. I'd have what I wanted, but it wasn't like it. But of course, as we know, that's not helpful. So I probably did gain some body fat on that holiday, which then re-diet off would have got rid of some muscle, no doubt about it. So anyway, did that, came back. Finals would have been October, and it was actually at the university. I don't think it was Warwick. It was at a university campus. That's all I know. Could have been Warwick University. Which was it was in like the big one of their amphitheaters. But I just remember it being on the campus. So I went down, junior bodybuilding, and sat with Jack Richardson pre-stage and backstage because I kind of knew him, and I had no expectation. Big class, probably a dozen, and half of them were class winners. One had won or been close to winning an overall in the novice show earlier in the year. So there was some good lads. And if you look back now, actually, I'd say most are retired, as daft as that is, even though they'd only be 30 now or less. So went out, and this was a different version of events for the UKFBA because you knew you'd placed before you'd go out for the final time. So if there was more than 5 of you, you went on, you got compared, you did your routines, but then when we were lining up in the backstage area, we'd call out the top 5 in no particular order or number, 2, 4, 6, whatever it is. So they'd go out, do a pose down. No, sorry, we did the pose band together, but they'd go out, get compared once more, and then they got the trophies. And didn't place, didn't expect to, was miles off it. You could look back now and be like, yeah, no muscle. But on the show notes, it said I was one of the most conditioned. I read that now as you were skinny, but we could see your glutes, so that's okay. And I did. I actually had like proper dialed in glutes, and I genuinely did. I can get photos up, and I've never struggled to get my glutes in per se. Like it's just something that's comfortable for me to do, and I don't know why. But I actually had a couple of people saying like, "Oh, that was like, his glutes are in." And I think even Rich Gazdecki on the USN stand, because he always was at those shows, was like, "Okay, now your glutes pretty lean," and then I was like, "Yeah," and then obviously I didn't have any muscle anywhere else, so really good experience, and like watched the rest of the show. It was a really, really good show. The winner of juniors was Dan Park, who you may or may not know. He came back as an open guy about 2019, came third or fourth at the British. Fantastic, unbelievable, mate. He's fucking immense. He like broke the internet when he was a junior because he was with Zach Fotheringham, who wasn't the coach as he is now in terms of his name in the industry, but he was on the up. And Zach shared some photos of him on Instagram, and he actually reshared them probably a couple of months now, and he was just like peeled. His Christmas tree was like, not just lean, but like it's almost like ridged. Each line's almost like poking out, like unbelievable. And I remember he put those up, and like the internet of like our corner of the internet went wild. Everyone was like, "What the fuck? Like juniors aren't supposed to look like this." So he won, and he comfortably won. I think he won Worlds as well, and he'd have been compared in the overall definitely. But that was a vintage year because Stu McCulloch won the lightweights. Ben Howard won the middleweights, and Sam Watt won the heavyweights. So we've got three guys who went on and have won pro titles as WNBF athletes, and actually all three won their pro cards that year. So Sam Watts has won a couple of pro titles and placed top 2 at Worlds. Stu McCulloch has won a couple of pro titles and has placed top 5 at Worlds, and Ben Howard has won WNBF in 2018 as a lightweight as a pro. So yeah, it was a great year. So yeah, that was my first season, and for me it was like, okay, I want to do this again, and I just full head first went in and was like, yeah, absolutely doing this again. So just obviously because I know people are interested, the training I was doing was like a 5-ish day split. I seem to remember it was like push pull legs with like an upper lower. Just trying to hit lower twice in a 7-day period to get them on. One was a slightly lower volume. But compound heavy, quite a few intensifiers, Damien's preferred method of training. So I just kind of did that without any sort of like, okay, this is without kind of asking. I just basically did what he told me. So that was the training, and then yeah, just went into the first off season. So that's my first season. So yeah, it got me hooked and. Bit very varied, but you know what, it was like I say, if I'd not placed at that first show, I think I certainly wouldn't have carried on competing potentially anyway. But yeah, I got to know people like Steve Hall. I got or know of them at least following AJ before obviously he became famous. And I mean that I'm not taking a piss by saying that, because obviously he would be seen as Instagram famous now for our community, and he's done a lot of amazing stuff, and I highly respect him. So I got to know of him and a couple of the other like kind of named influencers for natural bodybuilding, and then I just learnt more from there and went into my first off season. But so for you, Luke, what is there anything you'd kind of mention of what I've said, and then obviously off the back of that you can head into what your first and competitive season was like?
Yeah, so I mean, I'd say a similar route, so to speak, kind of like with the introduction from it. But I've been someone who trained so the first time I picked up a dumbbell, so my introduction to actually training and kind of wanting to progress my physique was I was naturally a skinny kid. Always played like team sports. Typical, played football, never really good at it. Okay, but never anywhere where I could progress going on to like semi-pro or whatever from that. I was just far from it. More just kind of like athletic, so to speak. I'd be quick. I wouldn't be strong when I was younger, and I was getting pushed off the ball a lot. So my introduction to kind of like going to the gym was because I was that skinny kid and I was getting pushed around. Right, I would beat someone to the ball, but I'd just get pushed off it. So first of all, before I actually went through into a gym, I actually got my stepdad's dumbbells, 2 pair of dumbbells that were left in a farm, left in a barn up at his dad's. Started doing them whilst I was probably in the second year of school, about 13 here. So searching up on YouTube, like how to get 6-pack, whatever. for me being a skinny kid, I literally just done like leg raises off like the door frame, couple of like a plank for a minute, crunches. Within about 2 weeks, I was like, oh, I can see a bit of visible abs here. Like maybe I'm packing on a bit of muscle. So that was my very, very first kind of start into lifting and training, so to speak. And then I actually transitioned from playing football to rugby. And that's when I really noticed, right, okay, yes, I've got the speed to get past people, but now I am really at the bottom end of like being really under muscle for playing this sport. So first went to the Top Bodies gym in Huddersfield. A lot of people will commonly know that, well, I'd say now, but if you go back over the years, we've had the likes of Dorian training there, world champion Nigel Davis. And I first went in after school in my school uniform, get the bus from school in my uniform with my bag packed, go down to Top Bodies, and I was like, I'll just lift a couple of weights, see how we get on. Then start searching things a little bit more. I do see the likes of Ryan Terry, but it was back then seeing like Zeus, Jeff Side, all these Gymshark athletes who was obviously not. I was like, oh right, how do it like these guys have got heaps of muscle. How do I get like these guys? So searching through, probably even having a nourishment post workout at that time. But it got me into like the introduction of being in a gym, and back then I was an anomaly really. There wasn't really any young early teens in the gym, because that just wasn't wasn't normal really. So doing that, so I actually bumped into Nigel Davis back then, probably when I was about a year or two into training, so 14, 15 then. And after school, when he'd be there after work, we'd actually train together. I had absolutely zero idea who this guy was. I just thought, oh, it's just the guy down at the gym who's helping me, and I get to train with him. Like I told my mum back then, it'd be like, that's a bit weird that, but anyway, crack on with it. But yeah, Nigel Davis, like multiple world champion winner, like great physique from there. So yeah, over probably 3 years into training, probably then got a bit more of an insight into from going. I think I started off, I was doing like Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I thought, started off, go through opening, probably like £3 entry, like go through. Went with one of the lads from there. He was actually like playing rugby for England at the time. Him and his brother was to like a high standard. And back then I wanted to was quite strong on pushing because I'm quite a short bloke. So what I did back then was like, I'm stronger than you on this. So we did chest probably 3 times a week for my first year or two into training. Not ideal. Looking back, I'm like, right, why am I a lot stronger at pushing than I am at pulling? Kind of makes sense. And then when legs got mentioned, we might do a leg press every now and again, but other than that, not too much on that. But yeah, coming into like 15, 16, so towards the later end of school, I'm probably doing like a bit more of a bro split then. I look through at the likes of, I see the likes of Ronnie Coleman and stuff, like magazines was still popular then. So this was probably like 2016, probably, I would say. 2016 or so. And I obviously know these guys like on gear or whatever. And I was probably that oblivious at the time that I just didn't know or understand that those people around me who had more muscle were using PEDs potentially. So I just thought, okay, like I'll just keep training as hard as I can, see what I can recover from. And when it came into training, I'd do the basics. But there was one guy who said when I was in the gym, oh, if you want to keep a small waist, don't do your deadlifts. And that was probably the worst bit of advice you could give to someone in the teens trying to pack on some muscle. Because ultimately that's why I've got weaknesses in my posterior, because I didn't do deadlifts. And no, it won't grow your waist effectively. It probably do the opposite. If you've more muscle on your back, it'll give you the illusion of having a smaller waist. So yeah, I just used to push a lot. Did my back days, never really hip hinged. Followed a bro split, did my arm day. And then yeah, continued doing that through into towards college. Went through, so after finishing school, went to college, did like exercise, sport and exercise science, did that for a year. I was like, well, after a year, I'm thinking, why am I doing this really? Because I kind of know what I want to do. Like I love training. So like I want a PT. So I did that course when I was 17. I should have really done like a diploma or whatever, but I had some savings from doing like manual labor from like 16 onwards. And I was like, I'll pay for my PT course. I'll do that. But looking back, a 17-year-old, like he's trying to apply for jobs as a personal trainer. You're like, oh, 3 or 4 places they must have been saying, oh, you'd be great, but you don't have the experience. Everyone said the same thing, which ultimately is true, but I wouldn't get the experience if I didn't work with people. So off the back of that, I just ended up working full time, like doing groundwork. So I did that for about a year. As soon as I finished, like you'd say, like a manual job, it's quite kind of hard, but I love training. So I'd work my full day from there. And then as soon as I got back, I'd either definitely not the most optimal in terms of the pre-workout nutrition. I'd probably go get a Sainsbury's pizza, refrigerated one, put that in. Looking back, probably a decent amount of carbs, fats, a little bit of protein. It goes in. It digested well back then because my output was high. I'm not saying go smash a Sainsbury's pizza to you guys. But then I'd go train. I'd get the bus, walk under. It was about a 15-minute walk from the bus station towards the gym, go to Top Bodies and just go do my 5-day split with doing my chest. I did like chest, back, rest. I might have done like legs, arms, and like shoulders, some form. I don't know how exactly that ran, but that was what I enjoyed. Like I was kind of like looking at the clock, waiting for my day to kind of like be over, just so I could go eat and then go train. And then I go back and watch them like similar kind of like YouTube videos on bodybuilders from there. Probably smash a nourishment can on the way back. And that got me through. That was the buzz because like just seeing constant like newbie gains and progression with being a skinny kid, as you build a little bit of muscle because you're lean, you'll think, God, I've got a shed load of muscle here. But I was probably about less than 60 kilos at the time. So yeah, that was that. So after a year of that, I actually then went to where I went working abroad from 18 to 22. So I trained very, very hard from there. And like looking back, they would have been my golden years to pack on as much muscle as possible. But I was enjoying the process. I was getting pretty strong then. I think actually in around my college years, I was probably bench more than I do now. I think I had like a 160 bench, zero chest, but I could move it. And that's how you've got to start at the end of the day, really, for for a lot of people. So did that, went working abroad for a couple of years, went working overseas in Greece. So it was a case of that being seasonal, train as hard as I can within the 6 months, don't really get time to train for the other 6 months. But I didn't really have a time frame to allow myself to either gain muscle or diet down. It was almost like regain a little bit of fullness, but then drop it down so I'm not fat when I go work abroad. Because when you're in overseas in Greece, abs, that's what I'm like, as long as I've got abs, like that's fine. Everyone will like me. Everyone will stop for me if I try sell them something because I've got a bit of abs. So that was that. And then COVID hit. So stopped working abroad from there. The gym shut. Bit crazy through like everything shut down through from COVID, to be fair. And then the only thing that I wanted to do, like train during that time, I couldn't do. And like that brought me onto running just because other like friends around me, I was probably the only one in my kind of like close friendship group that actually went to the gym. But one of the other lads, he was like running consistently, and he was like, "Oh, why don't you get into this? Go for a run and then see how you fare from that." So I did. The first time I did a 5K, probably just scraped under like 30 minutes, to be fair. So that was that took its toll, to be fair. Did that. Coming through towards that period, so like fast forward it a little bit from there, we was kind of like working up to doing like long distance running. I was just doing it just because there was simply nothing to do whilst being put on furlough. I didn't actually go through into working in the fitness industry at this point. But that's kind of like what accelerated after that. So doing long distance runs, then I decided to actually, you know what, like I'm enjoying this running. I'm progressing quite quickly at it, as you do with doing it like consistently, because I didn't have time to really, well, there was a lot of time to be able to do it. So every time I was doing a run, I was like improving my time quite drastically. So I was like, oh, I'll book for the marathon. Because of COVID, it's normally like the April, which Manchester Marathon's around this time. But it was in October because all things was like locked down and whatever. And I was like, you know what, I'll do that. I'll test myself to doing it. I'm working up at my running now. this is probably the best chance I've got to tick off a box like that of something I thought I'd never do, because growing up I was like a sprinter. I was quick, but I could never really do any form of kind of long distance running. So did that. About a month in towards my training for that, I actually had plantar fasciitis. If anyone's had that, awful. So trying to like manage like clocking miles in when doing that, not ideal at all. And also with this, I was complete novice. I was just running at zero thought behind what I was doing. I was that scared of going needing a wee whilst like running. I specifically didn't take any water with me. So stupid, really. Um, so yeah, made sure I had like a decent amount of like, I didn't eat too close to it, so I didn't like wanting to throw up and stuff. But yeah, that was the fear in the back of my mind, was make sure I get through this without peeing. But then a month later, the gym started to reopen. I was kind of like rehabbing my foot as well, and then because we were so restricted from that, when I came back into the gym, I was like, God, I've missed this a lot. I've missed the like training, and then was able to kind of like progress with things. Obviously, just getting working numbers back up. Realize how my body's kind of changing. Also at this period, because I'm into getting into the gym again, I realize I've got a decent amount, like decent output. I can eat a lot, but I'm also getting quite lean as well during the process. It was around 75 kilos at the time. And then I was going to the gym, training at a set time through with one of my close mates, who's a PT now, Ethan Sam. And we decided to do a photo shoot because I was going to get leaner with my running. I've booked in for doing this Manchester Marathon, which is October time. I think we did a shoot. It was either about 3 days before or after. So I think we had 16 weeks leading up to that period. Food was quite high then, really. I think it was around 2,800 calories I started off at. So to kind of prepping up that. But I started at 75 kilos because I got leaner from my output being higher from the running. And I was coming down. I got down to 60, around sub 70 relatively quickly. About 6 weeks in towards that, I was kind of telling Ethan, like, I'm loving this gym thing, but like, I've got this marathon now. Like, I'll do it, but I'm not that bothered. I just want to see where I can get my physique to. As I got down to about 4 weeks in with the photo shoot, like the diet with Ethan coaching me, I was like seeing things change quite drastically, and I was like, oh, see how much muscle I've got under this like body fat, because I've never really been that lean before. I was like, I always saw the pictures like of people on the wall. Like for those that don't know, like Top Bodies is like the big bodybuilding gym within Huddersfield. I say big with a pinch of salt, which is nothing like your Ultra Flexes or anything like that. But in around that area, that's kind of where all the bodybuilders like go to, have come from. Like I say, Nigel Davis. There's even photos of Dorian training there. I think in the 90s, would have been about in the 90s, wouldn't it? Or 80s. Yeah, about 90s, 80s. Yeah, yeah. So see the photos from that, and I'm now I've got the kind of understanding and know like who is like a natural bodybuilder and like some of these guys like the assisted ones, and I'm like something I've looked at. I was like maybe I could do that. Like I'm enjoying. I can see the changes now. All it needed was having a coach and having your nutrition nailed on to see what you can do from being like as consistent as possible with your training as well. So I thought, asked Ethan, I was like, what do you think about like doing a bodybuilding show, a bodybuilding prep? I know there might not be any at this time of the year. I know with things up in the air with COVID and stuff. Because it was late on in the season, I know UKDFBA did the international finals then. But I think there was kind of like room. Normally, you would have had to do like a standard like qualifier through for them, and I think I still missed the UKDFBA final date on that year. I believe so. I know it was a year later than they just did the international finals. So the only thing that was up then was the two rows Natrual, and I think it was either the second year running in 2021. I believe 2020 was the first year. It might be either the first or second. No, it was
Maybe,
actually the first
maybe.
year. I believe it's the first year because
Was it first?
yeah, the year prior, Bob Waterhouse won his pro card, natural, because he was actually prepping for the
Yeah.
DPAC Worlds, which brings me on to Bob as well, because Ethan wanted to compete the year prior. So he had Bob as his coach, got really lean and just decided like it wasn't for him. And fair enough. It's not for everyone. Like it's an extreme sport at the end of the day. Like there's getting lean and there's getting like stage lean, two completely different things. And I still don't think like I've truly hit like that stage condition. And I know it will come in time. So Ethan actually put me onto Bob because he's worked with him before. He knew like what he got through out of that. So I contacted Bob just before coming like 8 weeks out of this show. I was like, oh, this is a show I'm looking at doing. Like, what do you think from there? And he was like, well, you're pretty lean now. Like, but I also said to him, I'm doing a marathon like in 4 weeks as well. I'm doing the Manchester Marathon. It's like, yeah, I mean, you're pretty lean. You can do that. It's probably not the best way to do things. And you've not had like a structured off season towards it, but you can, yeah, dip your feet in and see if you enjoy the process or not. Like I've already been dieting for about 8 weeks up to this point anyway. So I went on that. I think we dropped down to about 2.6 calories with Ethan before. Bob said I was like, I was a bit flat at the time, so I bumped my food back up a little bit to 8. And at that point, I was like, just do the miles in on doing one run a week to ensure that I can actually complete the marathon, because that's what it was. It was just a tick box by then. So yeah, I pretty much hovered around like the 70s to 69s for that 8 week period, but just continued to get sharper. Weirdly enough as well, Finn, my glutes was like really, really dialed in and sharp then. I had zero muscle though. My lower body was just like, lower body, I looked like a marathon runner. Upper, I was like, yeah, this just looks wrong. Like, you looked at me from the top half, you'd think, what is this guy doing here? You look down at his legs, you're like, all right, yeah, maybe he might have be up there for a runner. So did that coming through. So 4 weeks prior to the show, did the marathon. Because it was a decent amount of output, Bob was like, yeah, just go eat whatever from there. And he was like, you're training like a bodybuilder anyway, so like just continue with the similar split. But here's how I would structure your training going on forward from there, because I was doing a bit more volume than normal. Then he kind of approached me to the typical, well, I say the typical now top set back off approach, whereas before I'd be like, oh, I'll see if I can do 3 sets on a dumbbell bench press and see if I can get away with it. Did that, had a burger through after. Also, if anyone's watching this and thinking about doing a marathon, don't smash a can of rain just before doing it. Not ideal. I know people mentioned doing caffeine before. Yeah, not a good idea. So coming off the back of that, digestion problems with that. But yeah, managed to hold out well for the remainder of the 4 weeks. Two-Bro's Natrual Classic, and then I think it had the British qualifier, which was 4 weeks out from that. How Two-Bros do it though, they've got so many subcategories within it. I think it goes up every £5. But I was 24 at the time, so I just missed juniors. And I did. They've even got first timers and a beginners class. So first timers is literally your first time. You've never competed before. Beginner, you've competed either once or 3 times before. Don't know why there's 2 classes for that. So if I entered beginners, I would have been the only one in that class. There was 4 first timers, so no idea why they've done that. Well, I do know, because you pay per class you enter. But anyway, that's on to another thing. 4 people down there in the day, all the way down to Maidenhead. From me being up north, like a 4-hour drive, but that was the only thing available at the time. Ethan actually, thankfully, took me down there. Don't think I'll ever repay him for that, to be fair. The protocol with how it was done, I think it was like get 2 bronzed who did like the tanning. I had no idea that I was going to stand there with a sock on. I had no idea about that. So that was my introduction to bodybuilding. And then they actually run. So the Natrual show was in the latter half of the day. So they had the Mr. JT Classic or Grand Prix or something at the start of the day, where it was all not assisted. Well, majority of them was assisted. So it was like an open, non-tested show. So I'm seeing all these huge guys, like densely muscled, and I'm just me, sub 69 kilos, about 150 pounds, like trying to get tanned up with 0 legs, done a marathon like 3-4 weeks before. I'm like, God, here we go then, boys. And I see some like really lean, sharp guys, and it was like, oh, you look, one of the guys, I think Lewis, he competed in WNBF last year. I can't remember his surname now. And he was like, oh, you look sharp. He was like, you're doing men's physique. And I was like, at the time, I was like, no, I'm doing first time as bodybuilding. He was like, yeah, good luck for him there. I knew he was like, let's see how you go. So yeah, very under muscle there. There was 4 in our class. The top 3 was the guy who was first, very just heavily muscled, very heavily muscled, big quads, set of calves on him. Wasn't as sharp as me, um, but like just heaps more muscle. It had probably been 180, 190 pounds or something on stage when I was about 150. A similar height as well. A guy in third, shapely, just didn't have a back like me, and my back was quite sharp, so I came away with second on that day. So it was a decent introduction to things, but because like knowing it for at the time and social media was kind of like bigger then than the first time you had done a show. So like people was hyping up and thinking, oh, go on, you've won this show. You're going into it thinking you're winning. And it's like one key thing I'd say is like, don't listen to them, especially if they've never been to a bodybuilding show before. You don't know who you're going to be up against. And that's all ultimately before you've seen who you're going to be up against. That was my introduction into things, but tanned up through on there, glazed backstage. We didn't have much time to kind of get backstage either. And it was at the same hall, the Braywick Leisure Centre, as they had the show recently with the kickoffs of Michael DeRule. And just one thing to say on that as well, because I did that same show. There's females, like there's bikini athletes backstage there with the guys anyway. So they don't really split them up. So yeah, I'm on the bull side over here. But yeah, you could actually
you're not being allowed to do another two pro show now. I've said that.
Yeah, two bros now.
Forever.
No, yeah, no IFBB Pro card coming for me. But yeah, that was my introduction to things. Luckily, that was luckily. I mean, that was the first show I had ever seen as well. But because they actually had the open show beforehand, I got to see a few of like the men's physique athletes beforehand. But I got down there and it was not kind of what I expected because it's in a sports hall. And I'm like, this is a bit weird. This like you're just on stage from there, and it looks a lot different to what you'd see on social media to actually being down at a show. But like seeing these guys, I'm like, wow, these guys have got heaps of muscle. And I can't remember who was down. I think Theo actually competed that same. Theo competed at that show. I'm sure there was Steve Hall was down there.
Yeah.
In bodybuilding. I can't remember a few. I think Taff as well, who's actually now an IFBB pro from.
Yeah, Taff won it that year.
Yeah. So he did this was the qualifier, and then the finals was 4 weeks later. But yeah, enjoyed that experience. But like I felt like I didn't get the one thing I'd say with Two Bro, because they had so many classes, they had a lot to go through. They had ultimately a show beforehand, and then they did the naturals after, and it was just kind of like, let's just get through these. Which is a fair enough. It's like the first time they've ever run it. I think they did it just off the back of Bob winning the classic over the guys that just had more muscle on him. And like, fair enough, going an avenue into that. But how we'd walk on, so you'd have like a 30 seconds, just like almost like an eye walk, which what like a lot of like as you'll do like in men's physique. Go on, hit your poses, then you're up. There's only 4 of us anyway, so it doesn't take a long time. The guy that was winning, he just heaps bigger than us. So it was like, yeah, fair enough, that's first. Second and third, we moved a little bit. And then fourth, we were just soft and under muscled. And don't know if he'd watched this through or whatever, but I'm sure he'd agree to that if he watched it anyway. And that was it through and there. But didn't get a lot of stage time. So I kind of felt like my introduction towards that was like, yeah, I've come all this way down, like come 4 hours down here, 4 hours on the way back. And I was on stage probably less than 3 minutes, and that's with a minute routine. And I kind of was a bit like, I don't really know about this. Like, I feel like I will enjoy it, but I feel like this isn't actual bodybuilding. And I knew from Nigel Davis actually helped me for my posing up until that point when I contacted Bob. So 8 weeks, and he drilled me hard for my posing. He's like, oh, you should do BMBF for this. But ultimately, I didn't have time. It would have been 2 weeks after I contacted Bob to do that. And I thought, it's probably not, never even tried hit a bodybuilding pose before. Well, I could have probably stood up there. I wouldn't have qualified, but it would have been probably a better introduction into like competing in natural bodybuilding, specifically natural bodybuilding as well. But did that through. Typical after that, smash some donuts. Had a Five Guys on the way back. Got that throughout the system, and like had Bob ask me like, "Oh, what do you think about the finals or whatever?" And I was like, probably not. This guy's like, the guy who beat me is bigger than me. Like I could stand up again, but I think that was the only qualifier I had as well that year to actually do the finals. So it was just, I was like, well, I'm going to be up against the same guy, so it just doesn't really make sense traveling all that way. So I didn't bother doing that. And the year after, like, and I'd almost say 2022 because of that was my novice year, my introduction into bodybuilding, because that's when I actually did the quote unquote the natural federations, did the UKD FBA qualifiers. Yeah, I was four in that class, but like four, we was all say like to a high standard really there. Like to say that we've come in fourth in that show. But up against yourself, I think point one well, 1 point decision between you and Jack Forburn that day. Craig, who also looked phenomenal. Came 4 out of 4 that show in 2022. And then 2 weeks later, did the BMBF Northern and came second out of 6 to Joshua Legate. Same case as 2021 there, just not, like miles above the rest of the class. I'd argue and say like second, third, and fourth was like it could have flip flopped around. Like someone was winning on different poses. George Osborne in third, and then I don't know the guy's name who was in fourth, but like he could have been up there. Like if he came second and I came fourth, I wouldn't have really argue too much about it, to be honest. And I'd say, yeah, me going through that year, as much as I had a short off season, and I didn't actually choose to compete through on that year. I'm glad I did, and like met the people I have through on this, like, and obviously setting up this podcast, and now in a long gaining phase to get back on stage, but to be competitive the next time we're on there. And ultimately, like I get beat on side shots, so I need time bringing up them areas, and it brings me back to when I first came into the gym, and the guy that told me at Top Bodies, "Oh, you don't want to deadlift because you get a thick waist." Bastard. Because yeah, he got me good then. But yeah,
He's
that's
got
pretty
a
much
few
like,
years of development, hasn't he?
yeah, a bit. No hams for that. I can't really blame him for the calves though. I think that's just a genetic standpoint, to be fair, mate. But yeah, I'd say 2022, like I said, that felt more of my year into it. Ultimately, all shows I've qualified for British finals. At the UKD FBA show, I didn't then on that specific category, but I did classic at the time. Came third out. I think there was 6 on that day, but ultimately I knew I wasn't classic. The other guys was way above me, and fell into like digestive problems there. And in a way, it allowed me to set up my off season a little bit kind of earlier anyway. And then watching back, like seeing the likes of you, Josh, Con, and whatever continue through, I was like, massive FOMO here, like missing out. But needs must. The stage will always be there, as the common phrase is. But yeah, that's
Yeah.
kind of like my introduction through into things. Like definitely not ideal on any of the approaches. I think the second year coming into 2022, neither of them have really been preps. I had a longer diet in my first year, so I'd say more muscle retained, but then also staying leaner for a long period of time. Not ideal. 2022, just crash diet, 35 pounds off in like 12 weeks. Let's get it. Like, yeah, you can do it, but he's going to look a little bit stringy on stage. And yeah, so I know the next time from doing these kind of like I'd bad experiences or comical experiences, you want to call them, you learn from these things anyway, and you know the next time we come through to getting on stage, it's going to be a much improved look just from improving these variables that go into managing stress, managing fatigue, retaining muscle tissue. Um, that's the biggest thing I'd say. Like, give yourself enough time, and also like reach out to someone who has been or taken others to where you want to be, rather than just simply winging it. Yeah, that's pretty much like in terms of where I came from, really, mate. Anything you'd add on there, or things that you think I've well, you wouldn't exactly know that I've missed out from there, but anything you want to kind of like go into a bit more detail on, really?
No, I would say I definitely had heard about that Two Bros show in terms of I'm sure Steve um, said in his class like he'd not even got into the front
To the front of
relaxed
the
and
back,
had called quarter,
I do remember.
and so he was saying the stage presence and time was woeful. But as I joked, mate, neither of us I don't think are going to be doing a Two Bros show, so we can say what we want. Because I'm currently blocked on Instagram by Two Bros for I don't know what for. I wasn't overtly like offensive to him,
You
but
followed
I don't
it.
know. Yeah, so neither of us I don't think are going to be doing that. So we can slate the show without fear of reprisal, because a lot of people, unfortunately, don't want to actually slate shows or federations because they know they will be placed incorrectly. And we've seen it happen in the assisted side of things. If you call out a show or a judge, you are not going to have a career with that federation. So as unfortunate as it is, but I don't care because I'm never going to compete with them. So there we go. But no, mate, I think you were quite concise. Like I say, very, very different to myself in terms of your starting point. You were the typical go from school, training a bit more properly than I was. Certainly stronger than I ever was and ever will be. Certainly at bench press. So you were probably a bit more of what the archetypal someone getting into it as a young age, training in a gym like that. Like I say, my gym up until 2019-ish was a commercial gym, and there was actually, there wasn't an atmosphere in terms of what you get at somewhere like a Top Bodies, where there's a load of legends walking around. Like you say, Nigel Davis is there and you don't even know who he is, but he's just one of the old heads who's helping you out. Like, you don't really get that. Of course, you get a couple of the old and bold, but it's a commercial gym ultimately. But that said, Nath Styles, who's I say a big IFBB pro, he's probably the biggest IFBB pro in this country in terms of just sheer size. He was one of the first people I saw, because I worked at that gym as well. And one of my first days at the gym, walked through the door and I saw this big lad. And bear in mind, he's now probably about 100 pounds heavier than he was then. And he was the biggest guy in the gym then. So in my eyes, he's still the same size. But I don't mean that as in like he's not grown, but like he's always been that big to me. Even though he's only a couple of years older. But he was one of the first people I saw, and he, spotted, talked, it through. He was just starting out in his, getting into competing. So yeah, there wasn't really that atmosphere to say what you may have. And then I've moved across to where I work now, S20 Health and Fitness in Sheffield, where it is very much a good independent gym. People go there to train hard. We have, good bodybuilders, we have athletes, we have all manner of people like Sheffield Steelers players, we have track runners, boxers, we have like a big mix. So it does make a difference being in that kind of atmosphere. And also, it's very much, everyone has these different paths to the stage. And I think, it's certainly something that I wouldn't say because you train in a commercial gym that you can't compete or be good. I don't buy into that at all. But it is also that support structure around you. It tends to be in independent gyms. You get a bit more, over the backing, people spotting you, people help with posing. It's just a bit more of a family, a bit more of a community, I feel. So I'm not a big believer in, your gym is everything, but it does make a big difference. Like if you're training in an Ultraflex or you're training in a JD, you're probably going to have a better gym experience in an Ultraflex. I'd imagine.
Yeah, it doesn't narrow your kind of horizon as much. Like I've never really trained in a commercial gym, so I'm not that fully aware. But one thing I am aware of is kind of the norm is not seeing, like, let's say for those who train at like Ultraflex Durham, the norm is seeing a guy pull 300 kilos off the floor and he's natural, Kiefer. Like, seeing that allows you to kind of like want to push on to new heights. But if you're not seeing anything like that, you're not as, like, I'd say you're not as inspired by that, but you can see it. Obviously, social media and stuff now, that does help for that. And I wouldn't say it's like paramount, but it's definitely beneficial, like environment in anything. Like if you can be surrounded by people who are more in line with what you do, it's only going to prove beneficial. But what would you say is kind of like one tip or you'd give to those who are like who have aspirations to compete as a natural bodybuilder, but do train in a commercial gym, whether like a university student or that's just the only thing like closest to them?
Yeah, well, like you say, good point. The gym is the closest. You tend to go to the best one that's the closest to you. So if you're not driving, so you're a young, you might be 16, or you're in a smaller town, say a bit more of a rural area. Or say, I imagine some of the places up in Scotland, there's there won't be any gym for 40 minutes to an hour. Like, we're a little village where my mum lives. The nearest gym is probably Top Bodies, where all the BMBF crew, and that's in Perth, and that's 45 minutes one way, if not more. And that's the nearest gym. So, yeah, the gym that you go to ultimately is just the gym that you can go to regularly and consistently. Like, it's a bit like when you're working with a client. Like, the plan that they can adhere to is the best plan. There's the best plan on paper and the gold standard, but can they do it? Same with the gym. Like, all right, you could say to a 16-year-old who has to rely on his mum giving him a lift over bus, right? You've got a JD that's a 10-minute walk away, or you've got an Ultraflex, which is an hour on the bus. Yeah, the Ultraflex is nice and it's a great gym, amazing equipment, and people around you. But how realistic is that to go to consistently 3, 4, 5 times a week, and especially if you start prepping or whatever? So yeah, the nearest gym to you is the gym that you will probably go to, and that is just about application of intent. If you go in and train hard, you'll grow. If you go in and you say the equipment's crap, so you half-arse it, you're not going to grow as much. Like, it's just as simple as that. Now, good equipment, in my opinion, it helps, but it's more like the icing on the cake. If you've got a standard cable row, like a Matrix or whatever they are in like a commercial gym, it's cable row. It does what it says on the tin. If you go 4 pins heavier for the same reps and the same execution and push your body weight up 15 pounds, you're going to grow muscle on your back. Simple. If you have a prime row where you can absolutely, you can put the plates at the right point to load the right range, of course, that's better. But if you're going 5 RIR on that, as opposed to someone who's balls to the wall on a Matrix shitty cable row, who's going to grow more? It's as simple as that. So your gym is as good as your use of it. Like, if you train hard, you will get a lot out of the gym. So, I mean, if speaking of Keefe, if you followed him that long, up until
It was at a commercial gym, wasn't it?
yeah, it wasn't even that. It was like a leisure centre. There was a squat rack, there was a bench press, cable row lat pull down, and maybe there might have been and there was obviously like a cable stack. Like, if you scroll back about maybe 4 or 5 years in his feed, every workout for him is just a barbell compound, a dumbbell compound, a bit of a cable, boom. Like, and he won British titles. He won, qualifiers as a junior in a team from training like that, and he was massive. He was probably 180 pounds on stage as a teen. He might not have been shredded, but he was a big boy. Like, so again, don't think that it is just you have to be at the best gym to be a bodybuilder. It's about intent. For Canal, we know people who train at home, like, and have limited equipment, but have won national titles, have won pro cards. Damo has his own gym in his garage, and he's a multi-British champion and a professional. He came his best ever. He came second at the WMBF Worlds as a pro. Like, it just shows you, it's about intent, and that's the main thing I'd say with that. Don't think because your equipment isn't prime or Cybex that you can't make any progress. Like, yeah, it helps to have nice kit, but at the same time, it's about application. If you're doing it with good form and with good structure and with good progression rates, you will grow muscle over time. Absolute fact.
Yeah, 100%. And I think even another one is like I'm pretty sure Ben Lloyd even trained at his own gym. I know now he does train out of like a King Gym, but I'm sure, like, let's say if he's tied up with clients and stuff, he can still get a good session in from his home gym.
Yep.
And there's obviously likes of Rob Colley that does it. We've got many, even the lads through in the chat. Plenty do it. Nick does it as well. So yeah, it can do it. It's ultimately it's a case of kind of like applying that intensity, and just being as continuous as possible with that, and you will get it out of it. I mean, even like I say, Pete as well. We've got a shout out to Pete. Like, in terms of the condition he brought as well through from his leg, like in 2022, unreal. Like, trains at home. So it can be done as well. Another one I was just going to mention through off the back of the bus story as well. So, coming through to my early years, I didn't actually choose the gym I was at. I actually got a So work experience, I think it was maybe do it like at 14 or 15. I was one of the oddballs back then who chose, I want to do it at a gym. They picked me out two gyms to do it at. One was a little bit more of a commercial gym. So I did a week there. I think I used to clean for like a week. Well, I mean, I cleaned for about an hour, sorry, not for a week. Cleaned for about an hour, and then there was like, oh, you can go train and then you can go home. I was like, oh, this is mint. I was like, this is a great introduction to work. This sounds spot on. I'm like a mini Ronnie Coleman here. And then the other gym was like an old school bodybuilding gym, and I'd have to get like two buses to get there. Like I didn't matter. You could get like the week pass, and it's still within like your West Yorkshire perimeters, so it's still included within that. You don't pay anything extra to do it, but they actually offered. They give me like a 3 month free membership, and I think I was about might have been 14 or something at the time. I was like getting into it. It must have been like 14 or 15, like middle age or like school. And I used to just get the bus from school to like Huddersfield bus station, then to Bailiff Bridge, which is almost like near in between like Halifax and Bradford, so like another half an hour or whatever, but like close to coming on the motorway from there. 3 month membership. So I was like, yeah, well, it's free. I'll just jump on that. I love my training. So after school, went and took the furthest route to it because I was like, ah, it's for nothing. I'm like, I love my training. I'll go do it. Looking back, I'm like, what an idiot. Like, why didn't I just get myself a membership? But love to do it. The things you do for training, I should have known back then. Should have got into competing back
Well,
then.
this is it. This is it. This is it.
Yeah, that's
So
it.
shout outs. Should we get some shout outs done?
Yeah, got some. Yeah, I know you've got plenty of shout outs. So, want to kick things off, mate?
Yeah. So obviously biggest one as we all saw, and segues a little bit onto what you're on about for your last BMBF showing in the lightweights.
Yeah.
Mr. Steve McDonald won the GCB last week in Aberdeen. So it's an assisted federation, but it's just like a standalone show. It's just I think it's called the Granite City Bodybuilding whatever show. And it's just ran by basically a load of Scottish bodybuilding, passionate people who just basically love the sport. Old school kind of vibe, plenty heavy metal. The world famous what we call taps off. So basically, audience members can run up in the pose down and take the top off and get in. The BMBF used to do that. The Scottish. So basically, anyone, athletes and audience members can run up and do a pose down, and it would go on for 5-10 minutes sometimes. So that was always a world famous thing. So yeah, Steve McDonald, who's Natrual, he won the classic, shredded to the bone, and he's a lightweight typically, so he's usually 69 or under. And he's a multiple, at least 2-time Mr. Britain in the BMBF as a lightweight. He may have won it 3 times. He's definitely won it twice. And he's one of them. He will just rock up unannounced kind of thing because he's in stage condition. Like 3 times, yeah, I thought it was. And I think one of those he was a junior when his first one. So to all intents and purposes, he's pro standard by an absolute country mile. I don't think he's got his pro card by just virtue of. I just don't think he has done. He never seems to do worlds.
Yeah, well, it was Flex, wasn't it, in 2022? And like looking from photos from the front, I was like, this Steve's got it this year. But I think it was just edged out from the back, really, wasn't it? But, I mean, you were there.
Oh yeah. It could have gone either way, and he's a fantastic athlete, and shout out to him. Not that he needs it, for hell, he's won more than I ever will. Incredible athlete. He's still in his 20s. He must be. And the thing about him is he's well, like case in point today, he's doing UK's strongest man.
Under 70 kilos.
So he's in show condition. He's got striated. Not only has he got striated glutes, he's got cross striated quadriceps. He's got. You can even see like his. You can even see like his hip flexors, like in terms of like from the side. Like you can see absolutely every single leg muscle he's got, and leg muscles. Like some people didn't even know it existed. And he will then today be doing a strongman event and place quite highly. Like, as we both know, like when you're in that level of condition, your training is abysmal. Like you do not feel very good at all to train. You have no strength. You have no confidence to put a heavy weight and hinge it and think my back might literally snap in half now. Like it just is. But he's a complete and utter. When I say freak, he is the epitome of a freak, and that is probably why he looks so good. And I know from previous interviews that people have done who know him, or he may even have done, he will prep. Bear in mind, like I say, he's 69 kilo or lower. He will prep on like 5,000 calories, like something stupid. Like he will have like 700 grams of carbs a day and be shredded, like in a deficit. Like he's an unbelievable freak of nature. So shout out to him. I'm sure he'll get probably a trophy of some description today. But in my opinion, if this means anything to him, he is the best lightweight in this country, pro or amateur, natural, like 100%. There've been some good ones over the years, but currently active. I know Stu McCulloch is around his body weight, and he's a pro and he's been in the game a long time. But like I say, and I love Stu. I think he's a great bloke. But in my opinion, I think Steve right now is clearly, and he's a 3-time champion, so he's got very good rights to say. I can't see pro or amateur anyone beating him in his weight category. Not a chance. I just can't see it. He's unbeatable almost.
Yeah, he's just that good, and the fact is able to do the strong, like even just alone doing that a number of months before, ridiculous, but literally a 1 week after, like not just doing a show, not just being in there in the mix, like winning, like being the best on the day. It's absolutely phenomenal. And yeah, just being at the top of your game in multiple sports, like it is possible. Like for most of us, unfortunately not, but like if you've got the genetics and the willpower to take it there on both, like why not? Why not take it there through on that? Yeah, I was just scrolling through photos from the 22 season of seeing Steve, and it's just like, wow, what a freak that guy is. Yeah, so any more shout outs through from the weekend, or to round up with a couple of questions?
I've not got any more potentially. There was one bloke I was gonna, but I'm not 100% anymore. Because he did a NABBA show yesterday, and I know him from quite a few years ago. He won an overall in the MPA, but like I say, I still believe he's natural. But it's just one of them. I wouldn't want to look a bit daft and shout out, but he looks quite similar to what he did back then. A bloke called Tom. He's like an older bloke, probably in his 40s now, but he's one of them like high level power lifter, thick, dense muscle, just as the compounds, quite short, but he won that MPA show overall. Probably it might have been 2018, 2019. Like no one was remotely close to him. Like just thick, dense muscle, old, mature muscle. You know how it looks when they've just done barbell work for 20 years. Like, and he looked pretty similar. So I'd say he probably is, but I wouldn't want to say for absolute sure. So yeah, just you got two good questions here. One kind of feeds into how will I do an outro talking about next week's episode to a degree. So we've got one here from a guy called Robin Simpson. I think he thought it was mainly a question box for like coaching, but to be fair, it's quite a good topic just to briefly touch on. And it will be brief because obviously we don't want to go on too long. Is talking about body fat proportion, and he's like, I've got quite lean lower half, but I carry more of my body fat up top. So this leads into nicely into bodybuilding and like, is this normal? And so if you're prepping, obviously the famous quote, you're only as lean as your fattest body part. So people are lean legged, fat upper body, lean front, fat back, and vice versa. So what that means is if you're getting in stage condition, you've got to get every part of your body in stage condition. It is all well and good having absolutely dug in abs, chest striations, cross striations on a tricep, massive horseshoe triceps, but you've got soft glutes and you've got soft hamstrings and your bum's a bit saggy when you turn around and do a back double bicep. Like it actually, even though your upper body looks good, it can actually make you look worse than someone you have more muscle than, because you're not balanced, you don't look in proportion, and it completely skews it. So yeah, in terms of having body fat in different areas, 100% it's completely natural, and it changes. I don't know about you, but I've noticed since my last prep, this is the leanest my legs have ever been at this higher body weight. I've got separation and I've got striations in my quads, and I'm still in my 80 kilo. I wouldn't see these lines until I was like sub 80 in previous years. So it 100% makes a massive difference. And all you've got to do, unfortunately, is dig in until the fatter body part comes in. Now, how you manage that as a coach is just keeping on top of not letting that, say it's your legs, and it's usually your legs that need to come in. Your abs might be, sorry, your upper body might be ready 8 weeks before your legs. But what you sometimes may have to do is sacrifice that fullness and, dare I say it, some muscle to get pro-conditioned legs, because you've just got to keep digging. And our body isn't going to go, all right, we're completely fat-free up top, so any body weight we now lose will just be from the legs. That's not how it works. It just isn't how it works. So you've got to keep on top of your training, keep pushing hard, even though you do not feel like it. Because if you're getting those legs in and your upper body's ready, if you back off on your upper, you will lose your upper body muscle. You will. And potentially regular refeeds and a really good communication level with your coach. So 100%, when it comes to body fat distribution, it can be different every single time you get your diet down. And it's completely normal to have front to back, top to bottom, or whatever it is. You might have a really fat front top and a very lean back legs. It's just how it is. So yeah, very, very normal, Robin. And it's just a case of you just have to keep going. Eventually, the fatter bit gets lean, but you've just got to be careful around the bit that's already ready. So what's kind of your thoughts around that, Luke?
Yeah, I think you've rightly said it. It's a case of like, if you still factor in other areas, you've got to still keep dieting down to get leaner in the other body parts. But ultimately, it's a case of like managing that. Managing you still having a decent amount of fullness going into it. Whether you look at kind of structuring, doing higher days around those body parts that are in condition, just to kind of like hold on towards that fullness through from that, and do the lower days around the kind of fatter body parts. But I say fatter, they're not exactly going to be fat, but like in comparison, like for like, they might be. Doing that, and also look at like your training around them body part areas. Like, are you dropping off reps? Like, let's say if it was your legs, like, have you dropped off a significant amount of load to where you started prep on them body parts? Like, you want to be training just as hard, and also seeing if we can maybe manage volume a little bit better going into them body parts. So there's many ways to do things, but ultimately not throwing the kitchen sink at it and just like getting it all off, because we still want to manage fatigue and just balancing things with high days around that. So kind of like driving down to new levels of conditioning, filling back up, then going back down. And that, it just means having enough time, allowing enough time to be able to do that. Because if not, it's a case of having to sacrifice a little bit more muscle to just get dug out glutes at the end of the day. But yeah, I think we've pretty much wrapped that one off, to be fair, mate.
Yeah, so then the other one here, and this feeds in nicely to what we will introduce for next week's episode. It's from Dean Nolan again. I really, really appreciate that, mate. You're asking questions in every pod and giving us a good shout out. So he just said, what would you tell yourself if you could go back in time and talk to yourself in our first ever prep? So what would you tell yourself now with the knowledge we have? And why this feeds in is because next week's episode, we are going to do a full episode about first timing competing. So what to expect, do's and don'ts, all this kind of thing. So it's going to be really helpful for a lot of you who are listening and watching and who are doing their first ever prep. It's going to, hopefully you can get something from that. And if you implement anything and it does change and help you, you can give us a little shout, and we'd love to help anybody with that. So yeah, Luke, what would you, I know we've kind of probably talked about it a bit in terms of your marathon, but what would you tell Luke in 2021 starting his first prep?
So it's a weird one. Like with starting, it's a case of like, right, depends on in terms of how much time you've got. Ultimately, like if we go like before that, I'd be a case of right, get a coach and start working with a coach as early as possible. And that means not just for your prep, but prior to your prep. So you've got a decent amount of time working in a surplus with him, and maybe doing a short diet phase before entering that prep. So you both have a better understanding of how your body's going to respond and react. Yes, it may be slightly different because there might be some slightly different lifestyle factors outside of that which change when you've come through into prep, whether it's a different job or you've had to move or so on from there, but you've got a better understanding and also a better relationship with your coach, because that's what's going to be paramount going into that. And if you haven't got a coach, and if you are starting prep and you're looking to think, oh, it's my first show, look for a coach, or at least have someone in your corner who has some experience, either themselves or taking others there, that can help you along the way. A second pair of eyes, because ultimately when you're dieting down for a number of weeks, you're going to be second guessing yourself. Like when you're at the lower level of body fat as well, specifically, you're going to be doubting yourself, thinking you need more to come off, or you don't want to lose fullness. Pendulum kind of swings both ways on that. So having someone and having just one point of contact on that, rather than asking for opinions off loads of different people, because if you do that, your head will be all over the place. So I just stick to that one person through from the start, one or two, and just listen to their thoughts. And if it's yourself doing that, just maybe yourself and like kind of throw an idea between back and forth with someone else. So you're not second guessing yourself. Like you may have a great understanding of what you're doing or what's needed to actually get yourself into stage level condition. But if you're going to have someone there who can also like approve of your decisions there, or maybe even like go back on them and say, yeah, it's probably not the best thing to do right now, it's only going to help like your decision making, like not just for this prep, but also future preps down the line as well. And also having like a timeline. I think that's the main thing. Having a timeline to work towards. So whether it's like, say you've got 20 weeks, I know we've got 8 weeks coming up, or might be 7 or just under 7 now in MBW.
7, I think.
7, yeah. But let's say if you've got, say, like 20 weeks to coming up to it, right? So expecting like a larger rate of loss through at the start, tapering that rate of loss down a little bit. Even maybe structuring when you've got like a slight bit of a refeed or like to take away from that, but also just having set goals to work towards. Because rather than just like pissing in the wind, you know what you're working towards. And ultimately, if it's the first time on stage, you're not going to know what your stage weight is. But if you've done a diet before and you've got relatively lean before, you're going to have a better experience. So like if you can work with, the earlier you can work with a coach, the more beneficial your first prep's going to be. But yeah, that's pretty much it from there. And I'd say, like, listen, like if you've got a coach and it's your first show, listen to your coach. Like that's what you're paying for at the end of the day. Like there might be a level of kind of like asking to have a reasoning or understanding behind why you're doing certain things, which is totally fine. But like second guessing things all the time, it's only going to kind of like have you stressing out and hinder your process at the end of the day. But yeah, I think that's pretty much
Yeah,
it.
absolutely.
Anything you'd add on there, really?
No, I think 100%. Reason why you have a coach, and ideally you've hired the right coach who knows what they're doing, has prepped multiple people before. Just listen to them the first time around. Second time around, or multiple seasons later, you might have more input because you know things. But first time, you've no idea. So yeah, for me, just to finish off, like if I was to go back to 2016, me, and what would I tell them is, just for me, it would be about training. I've learned to train so much better and more accurately. Certainly, even in probably since last prep 2022. My training has improved a hell of a lot. So if I'd go back then about just teaching about proper good training, the technique was there on most things, but it's certainly in intensity. I'm not sure the intensity was
Yeah.
as good as it should and could be. Accuracy was nowhere near what it was. So, like I say, just the whole thing around training, the setup, the mindset going in, how hard you push yourself. So, yeah, 100%. That's what I'd tell 2016 me is just improve your training.
Yeah, and ultimately, like just going off the back of that, it's like commonly heard, like what built the muscle will keep the muscle, and that's true. Like the longer you can stick at the same weights you were doing at the start of your off season, well, at the peak of your off season, going into your prep, it will show. Like yes, energy is going to be lower throughout a prep, but it is down to you to be able to actually, if you want to let go of them weights or if you want to retain them. And if you retain them weights, you're going to be more likely to actually retain that muscle mass throughout that prep and ultimately land a better look overall. So yeah, training is a big one for on that. And like going off that as well, like food energy will be lower and stuff, and there's food will always be there as well. Like get as much out of your training as possible, because then you're creating a larger energy demand. And the likelihood is, the better your training is, the likelihood of you being able to have a slightly larger and calories going in to get that body fat off is going to be more likely. So yeah, nail your training, get as much out of that, because that's going to be the main thing that's going to have you the best look possible. It's the thing we focused on for in the off season. It's the same going into a prep, but it's a case of, right, how do we still manage this and get as much out of us training as possible whilst dropping body fat? Nothing else should change.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. So yeah, for questions, we had that was it. So just got a good couple in there. So yeah, ultimately next week, as we're saying, first timers. So we'll really deep dive into what Luke's just been saying about training, nutrition, and we're looking forward to doing that one and really. If, like I say, because for some you'll be 6 weeks out if you're doing the first timer show in May, and for some of you you're not long since started prep, so actually it could be really useful if this is your first ever prep this year and you're just a bit unsure. So we'll just kind of myth bust. We'll do everything that you need to know as a first timer, mistakes we made, mistakes we see, and good things to focus on. So we've touched on some of them there. So like I say, that'll be next week's episode. And as I say, really appreciate the support so far on these. Like I said, I'll let Luke, sing us out, as they say.
Yeah, so like I say, as things going over there, next week, going to go over the NBW, kind of like a little bit of a preview in towards that. So we'll both get some question boxes up prior to that. So any questions in and around that show, or for tips for us, a first timer coming onto stage this year. But yeah, appreciate you all for watching. Please like, share, comment, subscribe, all that jazz, and we will catch you in the next one, guys. Peace.